All right, we are live. Hello, Jared Joyner. How are
Hello,
you?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you doing?
Welcome to the maiden voyage of the Edlow podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
How do you feel about being numero uno?
Um, a lot of questions. I'm like, where's this gonna go? What am I gonna say? Where's this gonna go?
What's funny is I'm like, yeah, I don't know where it's going to go either. So we were talking about it a little bit before we went live, and I don't really have like a format at all. I've had a few people when I've told them, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. They're like, oh, well, what's it going to be about? And I'm like, I don't know. Uh, yeah, it's. I've been talking about doing this for a long time, and I shouldn't even say that this was the maiden voyage because I actually did this one time before. I had set up the system I had, and then I had my brother come over, and we did two episodes. Where I interviewed him, and then he interviewed me, and each one of those episodes I think went like 3 hours each, and um, and then when it was over, I looked at him and I just said, I don't think I want to post this. Not because it wasn't good or that it wasn't interesting, but it was the first time that he and I had ever really, I don't know, ever really had a conversation like that. Like my brother's 5 years younger than me, and we kind of have different lifestyles and different life choices that we've made. So we weren't particularly close ever. We've kind of gotten closer over the last few years. And so that was really the first time we'd actually sat down and talked about life, what it was like when we were kids, what our family, drama, trauma, whatever you want to call it, how it affected us and why we made the decisions we made. And at the end of it, I was like, this was kind of special. Like, I don't think I want the whole world to hear this.
Yeah, that's like a family history like deposit.
Yeah, I just figured I was like, this is going to be something that we should record for posterity. And quite frankly, like, who cares, about what what our family was like other than our family. So I just thought I was like, there's some stuff we talked some really heavy stuff, and it's like I don't think it was something that I wanted to. I think I wanted it to just be something like just for us. You know what I mean? That we did. So it drives my sister nuts. She's like, I want to hear it, and I'm like, no, you
No.
can't. So, but no, this I'm like, I don't have a format. I just like talking to people, and people interest me. And well, I think the way I describe it the best, I remember I have a friend um, who she is a well, let me back up and say the story. I posted something I remember on social media a few years back, and I was interested in a kind of a mood, and I was really kind of struggling with something, and I said, I feel like I don't really fit in anywhere. And for those who are listening to this, if you don't actually know who I am, you know, I I'm Mormon, so there's that, and that's a big part of my life and my identity. But I also don't like a lot of the things that you would think a traditional Mormon does. Like I'm very into fight sports, pro wrestling. I'm into MMA. I'm big into crude humor and heavy metal, hard rock music. But at the same time, I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't do anything like that. And then I'm also an attorney, and I just have like all these different things. And I was just like, I don't feel like I fit in anywhere. I'm a little too hard rock for Mormons, but I'm a little too conservative and Mormon for my non-Mormon friends. And like I'm too conservative for liberals, but I'm too liberal for conservatives. And then I have this friend who is a transgendered Muslim pro wrestler who started a wrestling promotion, who responded to me and said, you know, I you may not fit in anybody's box, but perhaps you should create your own box so that other people can fit into it. And so I thought, you know what, this is the world is kind of a place right now where everyone's trying to fit each other into boxes. Like
Yes.
they hear I'm a Mormon, right? And they think, okay, well then you must think X, Y, and Z, or you must do A, B, C. or they hear, oh, you're into pro wrestling, so you must be like this, or we hear like someone's transgendered, right? So they must think X, Y, and Z, or someone's liberal, so they must hate this and like that. And it's just not true. Between everybody, there's a real human there with real life experiences that led them to the point that they're at. And I think that's kind of fascinating. And so I thought about, I go, okay, well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about who would I like to talk to about stuff. And then once I talk to them about that stuff, then maybe, maybe people, I don't know, there's fascinating things about everybody. And then maybe there's somebody out there who isn't necessarily feeling like they fit in a certain box, and they hear the story of whoever this person is, or they hear me, and then maybe they feel a little bit better about where they are in their own life. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So,
definitely. I'm right there with you with out of box to fit in.
well, that's why I wanted you on. because you're a very interesting person. Let me tell you. Okay, well, the first memory I have of you. So the first memory I have of you actually was I had seen you around. I think we were probably both 21. I can't remember exactly. How old are you right now?
40.
Okay, so you're a year younger than me. So I was probably 21, 22, and you were 21. And I had seen you around at like dances for, the young single adults. And again, for people who, if you're not Mormon, when you have the Mormon church has congregations full of what they call young single adults, ages 18 to 30. And so at the time, we were both in those congregations, and they would have events like dances and firesides and things like that. And I would see you around, but we wouldn't really talk.
Nope.
And I was just like, I'm tall and he's tall. That's interesting. You're 6'8".
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're an inch taller than me. And then one day I was actually promoting and going to be wrestling in the only pro wrestling event I've done since my mission, like actually wrestling on. And I came up to you with a flyer and I was like, hey man, here's this wrestling show. You should come. And you were like, no. And it was like, what a jerk.
Totally.
I walked away. And I didn't talk to you ever again until like years later when you and your wife showed up in my ward. And so,
right.
And then I realized, hey, this guy's actually pretty cool. He's got some interesting things about him. And so yeah, that's why I wanted you on. I wanted someone on who I was like comfortable with, someone I knew, someone I liked. But then also somebody who I found really, really interesting, who hadn't necessarily been on a podcast before, so that you wouldn't judge me for all the mistakes I make.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah. So just about you. So where did you grew up here in Sacramento area?
Outside of Sacramento, a small town called Penryn.
That's
base
really
of the foothills. Yeah. Base of the foothills. So I grew up in the country. We probably had about 2 acres of land. I lived across the street from the elementary school. So there was always something to do, but walking to a friend's house was not something you did. You were walking for a while.
Man. Yeah. And Penryn, even back then, I mean, in the 80s, and so you were born in 82?
81.
81. Okay. All right.
I'll be 481 in December.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, in the 80s and 90s, it was even smaller than it is now.
Yeah.
So, because it's kind of grown. It's grown a bit, right?
Yeah. I graduated 8th grade class of like 36 kids, and about half of them I started kindergarten with. So we were just a tight knit group, and we did everything together, and you participated in everything because it was a small town. So if you want to do something, you joined it. Like basketball tryouts for 7th and 8th grade, the principal walks in. He's like, all right, who wants to play basketball? Raise your hand. I'll get you a paper slip. Like you're on the team. Like there was no tryouts. It's whoever wanted to play played.
Well, that worked out for you because you were 6'8", so everyone was expecting you to play.
Well, not at that age, but yes.
Yeah, and that was another thing. So I'm fairly certain, because then did you graduate in 99 or 2000?
2000.
Okay, all right. So I'm just wondering if I don't remember ever crossing paths. What high school did you go to?
I went to Del Oro. I don't know if we ever played you, even like because you graduated in 99.
Right. But I didn't play the last year. So so I don't know if we ever, if you're freshman year, my side, because I would have been doing JV while you were playing freshman ball.
Yeah.
So I don't
But
know if we ever ran into each other. What's that?
I don't think we even like played each other. Like maybe during a summer league, but I don't have any recollection of playing preseason or going to a tournament.
Yeah, I don't remember that either. It was interesting. Well, but yeah, so you grew up around here, and what I think is so interesting about you is you have so many different, I guess, like, I don't know what to say, levels of your personality. So you're 6'8". You're a straight white male who is Mormon, who also is a hairdresser,
Correct?
right? And then also you just have some like eclectic tastes too. Like you collect records,
I
and
do.
and your music preferences are not, I mean, they're so eclectic. Like what are some of your main genres of music that you enjoy?
So growing up in the '90s, of course, all those alternative rock groups are great, but having older brothers and sisters and a younger brother and sister, like I got exposed to a whole bunch of stuff. So everything from Garth Brooks to Oasis to Dave Matthews to the Aquabats to Alanis Morissette, and then getting into the early 2000s stuff, like even the pop punk stuff and My Chemical Romance and Fall Out Boy. Like it really is all over the place. And as of recently, I've gotten more into pop music, which I never would have done before, but trying to appreciate the talent and skills that goes into just a pop song. So
Right.
it really is all over the place.
That's interesting. So when you say pop music, are you meaning like current pop music or even pop music from our time, or what are you
Uh,
talking
More current stuff, but of course, going back to the '90s, all that pop music was on the radio. But I
Yeah.
feel the pop music back then, it was still like the singer songwriters, and it was like Jewel and Alanis Morissette, and No Doubt, like was all on the same station, and it wasn't poppy like it is today. I feel like today's pop is just more like this is pop music, and that's the genre it fits into. And now everyone's trying to create their own genre, and they're trying to specialize what they do to get a fan base.
Hmm.
But I think for us in the in the '90s and the early 2000s, like pop, you think of like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Backstreet Boys, and Sync. Like that was pop music, but I feel it was intertwined with a lot of hip hop and rock and punk and this and that, and so I felt it was deeper. But that just may be my nostalgia of remembering of what that was back then.
Right. Isn't it funny now? I find myself often telling my kids, I'm like, oh, music today, it's not the same as it was back then, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know how much of that is true and how much of that is me just showing my age.
Right. But I feel like back then there were more groups who wrote and performed their own music to where I feel like one song can have five people who like chipped in on the chorus,
Yeah.
or
Right.
one guy who walked by the studio and he throws in a two words into the line and he gets his name all thrown onto it. And so it's to where there's performers where it's a look and it's a voice, but are they doing their own songs? Are they writing? Are they performing it? Or are they just there to sing and to look good? So I
So
feel
who are you into right now?
what am I listening to right now? I'm getting more into Taylor Swift.
It's a good
Um,
one.
and I think I appreciate her because she does write her music and she
Yeah.
performs it. And so, although it's pop, but she is evolving from the country that she started it into to the pop world, going into more folk stuff. So I haven't heard a single thing from her new album that's coming out soon. Um, so we'll see where shows like that goes. But as she gets older, her music has to evolve because if you don't evolve, then you just start to fall off. You don't want the same thing all the time.
Right. Yeah, I got to tell you, my daughters, of course, they just are in love with Taylor Swift, and we listen to it all the time when we're doing the breakfasts and all that stuff that we do. But but yeah, that you got to respect it. It's catchy. And
Yeah,
she's really good at it. And so,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know of anybody else. Didn't she just recently, like during the pandemic, didn't she just rewrite her old album and then re-release it and then it went platinum again?
So there's some legal stuff hooked up to that one because she did not own her music.
Right. That's
So
why she did it, right? She
right.
re-recorded it. Yeah.
So if you redo it, so then it's like, here's this song or here's this album, and it's Taylor's version. So it's the same songs, just re-recorded, but now she owns her own music, which I feel that whole thing is a legal mess that a lot of other musicians have gotten into, where they write their music, they perform it, but they don't own it.
Dude, when I hear some of the stuff, like, you hear some of the people in the entertainment world talk about just kind of the sheer horrors of dealing with those people. I mean, it's not the same. It's not music, but I sometimes catch myself listening to Dave Chappelle and his story about the things that he had to do and things that people tried to do. I mean, the amount of money he lost on the Chappelle show and how he wasn't getting any money when they re-released it on HBO or Netflix, wherever it was. It just sounds terrible.
Right.
And what do you expect? Some 18, 19-year-old kid trying to make it signs a contract, and it just, and then years later, these studios get to make all this money off of these artists' work, and the artist doesn't make anything. And it's really bad. And he's kind of a pioneer in the way that he just, he really, I guess fought that, and it sounds like he's doing the same thing. So
For sure.
man. So now so record collecting. So I tried after seeing you like post your records and doing things like that. I was like, you know what? That sounds cool. I love music. I'm going to start doing that. And it was expensive and it was hard, and like finding the right like equipment. What is it about? And I also realized something about myself. And that is, I was like, I don't really listen to albums all the way through that much, which I think if you're a record collector, like you have to appreciate, you put on a record and you're listening to a whole album. I mean, it's right. I mean, is that kind of
Yeah.
your experience?
There's no skip button. You can't put it on shuffle.
Yeah.
So it forces you to do it. So my experience with that, we're probably close to 9 years ago. My mother-in-law asked me to help her move some furniture from her sister's house in San Francisco. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can definitely go help. And I get there and there are things everywhere. So this is my wife's aunt, who is blind, and her late husband, who is also blind, had grown up in that house in San Francisco. So being a blind kid, he listened to records. So there were probably 2,000-ish records just in the house, just all over the place. And my mother-in-law said, whatever you find in the house, it's yours. If you don't take it, like, we're just going to toss it. And we're talking like, here's a Holy Bible in Braille. Here are computer things that will turn things into Braille. And here are music boxes. And there's an old Zach Morris type of cell phone. Like, just things that are everywhere. And so through the records, I don't have a record player at the time, but I like music. And so I'm like, I know it's kind of trending at the time, and I could sell it and make some money. So I'm like, I'm just going to grab a bunch of stuff that I recognize and some stuff that I don't, and I'll do some research and we'll see what I can sell it for and just make some money off of it. So I probably end up grabbing a little over 200 albums, and I started doing my research and seeing what these albums are going for. Then I find that there's some of these records that are on like YouTube, and I start to listen to it as I'm doing my research, and I'm like, this is actually kind of cool. And now we're talking music as early as like Bozo the Clown in 1948. I think is one of the earliest albums I have. Going into the Beatles and some Beach Boys and Peter, Paul, and Mary. Some classical stuff. There were some comedians out there. There's some Disney stuff, like all over the place. And so I'm like, okay, I think I can make some good money on it. So as I'm doing my research, I'm learning that I'm like, actually kind of like this stuff. Like, I got fascinated by the history of it. And these are like the bands and the music that has inspired the music that's going on now. and realizing that I haven't heard these albums all the way through. The Beatles' White Album,
Yeah.
sure, I'd heard like a handful of songs on there, but I'd never listened to the whole thing. So it took me a few months to go and to save up some money and to get a record player and started to listen to it. And it's like it forced you to listen to the whole album and to have an appreciation for the album as a whole and not just individual songs. And that changed songs. There's some of the really cool songs that are on an album and you're like, yeah, I like it. Like I'll buy that one song and put it on my iPod. And now it's like this song doesn't mean a whole lot without the other ones around it. Or there's just a different feel for it to where the song before it and the song after it, it just kind of flows together, it builds up. And I just kind of fell in love with that and just the details of it all and the fascination of some cardboard and plastic that can make some music, and people will spend a lot of money on it. So at the time that I started collecting, they were not as expensive as they are now. It's definitely gone up in the last probably 5-6 years in pricing, where before it was like $20 to $25, and now it's like 30 to 35, upwards of 40. And the bands have catching on to it because it's selling and they can charge a whole lot more for it and people are buying it.
Yeah, I'm noticing now more and more bands. Like I'm a huge Metallica fan and I'm a huge Guns N' Roses fan, and they're doing box sets that include just a bunch of records. And so I bought both of the box sets that I'm talking about, one from Metallica, one from Guns N' Roses. And it's really cool that they have that, but it comes with all this other stuff too. And then of course it's got like the MP3 downloads that you can put down too. But looking at these records and the art on the records now, I mean, that's the thing was such cool is you pull out the record and you're like, this record just looks cool. It's like, I don't know if I'll ever actually put it on a record player, but it's kind of cool. Like I took, so I bought, I think I bought S&M2 right after I actually went live to Metallica S&M2, and I bought that. And then I pulled out the records and I just remember thinking, I'm just going to put these like in a, like in a, what do you call those? Like a shadow box, and just kind of put it on my wall. Like, I think you gave me my first record. You gave me the Rocky theme, the theme song or the soundtrack. And I hung that up in my Rocky theater. So
yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So,
but then
how long have you been doing it now?
8 or 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And how many do you have?
Over 600.
Wow. And do you think so are these all just records that you just personally like the band, or was there some that you're like, that would be a cool collector's item? Or how do you choose which records you're going to get?
Depends on my mood that day. Most of them is music that I like or that I love. There are albums where I'm like, ooh, I have to have that one. When I saw Oasis's What's the Story Morning Glory put out, I'm like, I have to have that album. Like I
actually got that one too. I got that one too. Yeah, that's a good one.
That's the album. Like in high school, like I wore it out to death. Every song on that album out for me is killer. Like,
yeah.
And you can ask my younger sister. She's like, you play that album all the time. I'm like, so that's an album I need to have. There are albums I'll pick up from a concert to where I saw a band. I went to see the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, and I showed up in the middle of the opener's set, and I'm standing in the back of Ace of Spades, and probably 2 songs into the middle of their set, and I just turn around out to their merch table and I buy their album. I'm like, I really like these guys. These guys are fun. And I just bought it without hearing the rest of their music. There are some albums I've picked up being like, I can flip this and make some money off of it. And there are some where I'm like, everybody else has this album, I should have it too. The Clash's London Calling.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with this album, but everybody has it in their collection. It's so iconic. But I never heard it. Like there's probably 2 songs on that album that I'd actually heard, but because it was so iconic, I'm like, I should probably have that one and learn what this is about. And because it's a record, it forces you to listen to the whole thing. So I'll put it on as I'm cleaning or making some dinner. And yeah, you just get some cool vibes. Or if there's a yard sale or a good deal at like a record store, I'll buy somewhere. I'm like, I don't really know this, or I don't I'm not sure if I will like it, but for $5, I'll spend it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then, yeah, I have some albums that I'm like, I need to sell these. And I look them up and be like, the whole process of reselling them, because everyone's like, this is an investment. I'm like, it's only an investment if you sell it.
Right.
So there's some on my shelf that need to go. So we'll see what happens with that.
So do you just sell them on eBay, or where do you sell them?
I sold a couple on eBay. There are some groups on Facebook where I could just post an album, say, hey, I have this, who wants it? And because then I know there are people who also collect, but also who appreciate like the music itself. And so then that kind of holds me back too, because man, so there's the first album I bought online was Harry Styles. I don't know what the name of his first album is, but it's on white vinyl, and it was only sold on his website. And at the time, I didn't know who Harry Styles was. There was just kind of this feeling like, I think he's going to blow up. I'll buy this just in case. I don't know his music. And I spent $50 on this one album. And for me, I'm like, that is a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for a record.
I'll pull up what it's going for right now. And it is just kind of crazy. So this album, it's on this app that I have, it's said it was last sold on September 15th, so 3 days ago, for $454.
Wow. And you bought it when? When did you buy it?
I bought it 2017 when it came out.
So I've had 5 years later, it's worth 9 times what you bought for it.
Yeah. So for $50, thinking that's a lot of money, I could make that back plus an extra 400. Like,
dude, that's, people don't understand. Like, it's funny because I collect things too. Records are not necessarily particularly, like, I haven't really caught the bug yet. And I think part of it was because I'm like, this is a really expensive. This is expensive, I
got a lot this last year.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, but I remember, so, my Rocky action figures, right? Like I bought the whole Jack specific Ringside Collectibles, whatever collection of Rocky action figures. And they went through all the movies and put all these things. I probably have like 50 of them, maybe a little bit more. And my mom, actually, the whole way I started it was my mom bought me 2 of them for my birthday as just a random gift. They were $6 from KB Toys. I'm aging myself. KB Toys. Kids, KB Toys was a place that used to be in malls where there were toy stores, and you could go in there and you could buy toys. And
goody.
Yeah, right. I worked there actually for a Christmas one time. That was nuts. But yeah, so she bought a few of them, and I said, these are kind of cool. And then I was at a KB Toys, and I saw that they were only like $6 each, and they had the entire collection. And I just started buying them. And I remember everybody just thinking I was weird for buying these things. But now if you look on eBay, every one of them goes for a ridiculous. I mean, I think I bought them 15 years ago, and I just thought to myself, I was like, this is just something like when I have my man cave, these will be in my man cave and I'll just hang them up. I'm very nerdy. So this is like my thing. I'm a huge Rocky fan. And so, but yeah, like you look on eBay now and these things are going for obscene amounts of money. And so now I'm like, well, I mean, that's a thing. Like that, what was that? The 40-Year-Old Virgin, the movie where he had all the toys, and then he was able to sell them all and make a ton of money.
Right.
I mean, that's a thing, is that people don't understand like this nerdy stuff. There are other nerds who will pay top dollar, and they're all in our age now, and they all made a bunch of money. And so they all went into IT or tech or whatever. And now they got a ton of money, and they'll pay $1,000 for a toy,
as long as it's not open and you didn't play with it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Here's a toy. Look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. My kids sometimes, if they touch it, don't touch that. No, it's not for playing. But it's a toy. No, it's not.
That's not your toy.
Yeah. So that one, wow. So do you have other ones that are that go that much?
That may have been, I think that's one of the higher ones that I have. I'm trying to think.
You haven't sold that one yet.
I have not.
Oh, wow.
But it's one of those where I'm like almost $500 for a record. Like,
right. Well, the longer you wait, the more it's going to go up, right? I mean,
potentially. So it's all about the supply and and the demand. And so being that this one is on white vinyl, you can only buy it on his website. He's not selling that now. Like, he came out with another variant that was only up on his site for 24 hours. And I think that one goes for a whole lot more. But there are some that have that are a few $100. The Greatest Showman, I bought it from Barnes and Noble. The record's on blue vinyl for $24, and I could sell it for probably close to 200.
Wow.
And so, but it's a supply and demand. And so if it's a big name and if there's not a lot out there, then it goes up. But the bands and the people who are making the records have caught on to this this excitement, and it's turning into baseball cards of the 90s.
Yeah.
To where here's
I remember
this album, and we're gonna press it on 5 different colors, 1,000 each, and then we're gonna come out with another pressing, and then here's this on this package deal. And so I think the band Dance Gavin Dance had an album, Afterburner, and there's probably 13, 15 variants.
Wow.
And I'm like, so then it's like, if you're a big fan, do you buy all 15 of the same album? Do you find your favorite one? Do you find the one that is pressed the least amount of time so that only a few people have that? And it's kind of getting ridiculous on that side of things. Adele is kind of a bad name in the vinyl world just because she pressed her last album like an obscene amount of copies, which backed up all the other bands up from having their albums pressed like by months.
Is that because there's just there's not that many places that do it? So because she did so many that nobody else could get it out?
Yeah. And so now her album's been out for a long time, and you can still find stacks of like 20 to 50 at these record stores. And you wait a year or so and it'll probably be under $10 for an album.
Wow.
So it's like you're looking at it as, are they just trying to make as much money as they can right now? Are they trying to take advantage of the fans? There are some where they'll press an album variant of like 1,000. So there's only 1,000 of this color made on red vinyl. And then they'll do a second pressing that looks a lot cooler, and it's like only 500. So then those who are collecting, it's like, well, the one that's only pressed 500 and it looks better is going to cost more. So people are looking at it as, is this an investment? Do I flip it? Or am I just buying it because I like the music? And if that's all that you're doing it for, then it doesn't matter what color it is. And it doesn't matter what the art is. It's just, I'm here because of the music. Because it's a different sound. It's a larger feeling. You hear a lot of different things on vinyl than you do when you're streaming on your headphones or in the car.
So that was my next question, right? Like, what is the appeal of vinyl? And what I mean by that is I understand. So like older albums, right? They, in the 60s and 70s, they were creating the albums with vinyl being like in mind, right? So they were doing, I understand, I've heard, I think you even said this to me, is that with these older ones, if you buy the vinyl for these older bands, then you're actually hearing the music the way the artist actually intended, which I understand. But this new stuff, I mean, they're not creating the music specifically for vinyl. Are you saying that there's just a different sound to vinyl that you think is cool? Is that?
Yeah, when it is mastered for vinyl, you hear things differently. You'll hear smaller sounds out throughout the song. You'll hear the high highs and the low lows and everything in the middle, and depending on how your setup is and where the speakers are set and the needle and all the small little factors affects the way the record sounds. And there's some songs that I've listened to tons of times, and I listened to it on vinyl, and I heard something that I didn't hear before. And so I don't want to say the purist, but there are those where it's like on their high horse where like vinyl is the best way to hear music. It's like, if I can hear music, I'm happy. But it's a fuller sound. It's a different sound. It's not that it's better. People say that it's warmer. You get a warm sound out from it. I'm like, how can sound be warm? But it's hard to explain it. You just hear different details when like you're listening to it on vinyl on a good system. And I say that because there are some cheap systems out there where it's like, I just want to have a record player and I'm going to play the music. But when you start to get into it, and this is where it gets even more expensive, because my record player is like a $300 record player. And that is like a good beginning start.
Right. Right.
Like we're going to drop 3,000 on one and 10,000. And that's just on the turntable. And that's not even counting the receiver or the amplifier or the speakers. And so it can be as expensive as like you want it to be, but depends on what you want to do it for.
Man, that's nuts. It's funny you brought up the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. It's recently, not too long ago, for whatever reason, I was just looking through Ticketmaster and I saw that they were going to play a show down in LA. And I just all of a sudden was like, you know what? They were only excited. They were only hot for like a minute after Clueless came out. But then ska, they really started the whole ska, were one of the bands that started the whole ska craze that happened for about 5 minutes in the 90s.
Right.
Right. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, man, you know what? I've never owned a Mighty Mighty Boss Tones album, but I'd love to see them once. I'd love to get dressed up all ska-like and just go and see them. And I was actually thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll do that. It was going to be like May of this year. It was a long time ago. And then they just broke up. And then I was like, what the heck? After 25, 30 years of knowing that, the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones is out there, I didn't realize that I wanted to see them. And now I do. And now they're gone. Yeah. And Jared's seen them.
I did.
Man, do they still have the dancing guy?
Oh, yeah.
Is he the same guy?
Same guy. And that's all he does the entire show. It's just dance because, so there's a documentary called Pick It Up Ska in the 90s. And they talk about this big explosion of third wave ska that started in Southern California and the whole history of it all. And they're talking about him, and he was just his friend, and he couldn't get in backstage with the rest of the band. So he was part of the band and he just danced. And that's what he had been doing as a band member this whole time.
That's so odd. How cool would it be? Like, imagine that, like your whole life, right? You're just the dancing guy in Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. That would just be, how crazy of a life would that be? That you could just say that guy who gets in a suit and just dances for 2 hours on stage with Boss Tones.
The whole concert, the whole set, he's dancing, doesn't stop.
That's so crazy.
Yeah,
it is. God, what a way to get your cardio in too.
Right,
man, that's crazy. So now you've got 600 records. Are you said you're slowing down now, or are you kind of in a lull? What is your
with the pricing going up and knowing that a lot of these bands are trying to just get a cash grab on things. And I don't know if it's the bands, if it's the companies of which they work for. I'm sure it's not the bands themselves that are just trying to make as much money as possible. Of course, that's the name of the game when you are live, is to make as much money as possible. But it's a matter, I think I want to narrow it down to what my must-haves are. There's a lot that I've purchased that I'm like, that's fine. Or this was fun for a bit. I don't need this in my collection.
I've had that too. You like get into kind of doing something and then you're buying stuff. You're like, I don't even know why I bought this.
Yeah. But
I did that with my movie collection with Blockbuster when they had like 4 for $20. And I had 2 movies I really wanted to buy. And I was like, we'll try these 2 movies. And I've literally never watched them.
Not once. Yes. But they take up space because it's a physical,
right?
Album. Like, it takes up space. And so knowing that it's an investment, but also knowing that it's plastic and cardboard, like one flood, one fire, stuff's gone, worth nothing. That's right. And so I got into collecting. I got my 200 records for free, and those are all a bunch of old albums. And then I started to buy them. And I started to get into it because as a hairstylist, my hours are all over the place, which is terrible on the social life. So I don't have a social life. Like, you are my social life, Josh.
I'm honored.
But because of that, like, I had to turn down going out on dates with a bunch of other couples because I worked on Fridays until 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I had to say no so many times that they just stopped asking. So
Yeah.
this was something that I could do on my time,
Mm-hmm.
and I had availability, so I could put my focus on that. And so then I would get into things, and that's kind of how I got into picking up more along the pop stuff and just doing some more research about it. But it was to kind of fill in the time that it gave me a purpose. It's something that I enjoyed, um, but that was my replacement of social time because wife and 3 kids, working full time. There was a time during that where I was working 2 jobs, and yeah, it was a filler. And then COVID hit, and I got some extra money from unemployment, and so I'm like, everyone, I can't go to a store, so I'm buying stuff online, and I it just started becoming a I don't say I wouldn't call it a problem. Somebody else might. And my problem is not as big as some of these others collectors out there where they're still receiving probably 5, 6 albums in the mail every couple days.
Wow.
And but so for me it's kind of like, okay, why am I collecting? Why do I want to keep this going? Do I want to keep it going? And I started up school last year, and I think that's kind of when everything started to really slow down, is that my focus has just turned to school and not so much on records, because I don't have a whole lot of time to listen to them. So it's like, if I'm not listening to them, they're just there. Should I just sell them off? Should I keep what I want? Do I hold on to it for a bit and we'll see what happens over there? Because I could sell them and I could still get back into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
That's true.
it's one of these big decisions where I'm trying to contemplate, like, what do I want to do with it? But then taking the time to post it on eBay and make the trips to the post office and all that stuff. And then what the president has done with selling things online. If you sell more than $600 on eBay, Venmo, PayPal, then you have to report it. This is part of my income. And to where
Right.
a lot of people are like, that's kind of how I get my extra cash. And so then, do I want to get into that?
Right. Isn't that so ridiculous? The government has to just get their hands on everything. Like, you just bought something and you want to sell it, and just if you make $600 on selling old records that you bought, like, what about a garage sale? You know what I mean? Like, if you make $600, you got to report that. Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
You know, that's
And
just
so,
ridiculous.
but it's like, I know somebody, actually, you know them too. I'm not going to say any names here, but they'll flip stuff and sell it up on eBay and making close to 100,000 in a
Yeah,
year.
dude, who's that guy on Gary V? I think that's how Gary V it blew up so hard, is that he just went and bought stuff and then started selling it on eBay, and he just made a ton of money. Like, made a business just out of his house.
And and I think that's why there's so many people, so many industries who are having a hard time trying to find people who want to work, because I
You
can
can
flip.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's that's crazy. Well, man, so now let's shift gears a little bit, because I want to talk about this hairdressing. So I bet people, when they meet you, are a little surprised that you are a hairdresser, because you don't fit the mold, right? I
don't
mean,
fit in that box.
I can't think of a single person. And you're now full disclosure. When I was when I got back from my mission when I was 21, I worked 2 years in a hair salon as I called it front desk coordinator, but I was a receptionist. So yeah, that was another. So I just randomly, I was dating a girl, and she was a hairdresser, and she would always do my hair for free, and then, stuff like that. And she just mentioned, because I said I was looking for a job, and as a joke, she said, "Oh, you could apply here to be the receptionist." And then as a joke, I did. And then as a joke, I went to the interview, and then they offered me money, and I was like, yeah, why not? And so I did it. And I'll tell you what, you know what I think is funny about this, and I'm going to ask you about this, because you work around this, is first of all, I had a ton of fun. Like, I had a friend who was making way more money than me selling cell phones, and I eventually went and worked with him, but he tried to get me into that job for a long time, and I was like, I got to tell you, I love this job. It's a lot of fun. I mean, you just sit around with a bunch of, like, generally good looking women. And like, you just like, you talk to people and that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
especially for me, because I wasn't doing the hair cutting. I wasn't doing any cutting. I just was, answering phones and kind of like sweeping up hair and stuff like that. And you get to know the regulars, and they come in and you find out what's going on in their lives, and they tell you about, and you tell them what's going on in your life, and you just become friends.
Right.
That's awesome. So
Right.
what got you into it? What got you into being a hairdresser?
So I got to start from the beginning. Going from high school, knowing that I'm going to go be a missionary, I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. And I'm like, I got 2 years to figure all that out. And then the mission comes to a close, and I'm like, I have no idea what I want to do with myself. And so during that time, I was coaching high school sports, boys basketball and volleyball, working at Adele, super part-time at the junior college, trying to figure stuff out because I didn't want to commit to something. I didn't want to commit to a school full-time without a path, without a direction to go. I just didn't want to do it just to do it. And but I was also trying not to be a bum and live at my mom's. So I was trying to be productive, but I have no direction on which way to go. I met this girl who is now my wife of 15 years. And she's like, if you want to get married, I need you in school full-time, working full-time. And I'm like, I get it. Like, I'm in no place to support a spouse. Totally. I could totally do that. There's just one problem. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I got married at 25 and still no direction. And she's like, well, what are you interested in? And I'm like, that is my problem. I'm interested in this and that and this and that. She's like, just pick something. And I'm like, I've always liked my nutrition classes. So let's go that route. I know UC Davis has a good program there. There's going to be a need always because us Americans, we like our food and we need some dietitians around, some nutritionists.
Yeah.
So a year into school, working full-time, school full-time. I'm in it. She comes to me. She's like, my boss is crazy. I need a new job. I'm like, all right, you do it. But she's like, you need to do, I'll support you. And so she applied with Fidelity Investments because I had two brother-in-laws who were working with them. And she's like, they offered me a job. I'm like, that's awesome. She's like, they want us out here in 2 weeks. I'm like, where's here? She's like, Utah. And so I've learned that Fidelity has 3 call centers that people will start off with. One's in Cincinnati, one's in Texas, one's in Utah. So Utah was the closest. I had family out there. So I'm like, okay, then let's go. Like, junior college is not holding me down here in California. Like, we can go if that's what we need to. So now I'm in Utah. What do? Do I start school over again? Because transferring my credits from a junior college to another state, usually they're like, no, we don't accept this. Like, you have to start from the very beginning. So I get a job at a local high school as a glorified hall monitor. I got paid $9.50 an hour to tell kids to go to class. And I'm like, and I'm done by 3. I'm like, that's kind of cool. And it was during that time, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Do I just suck it up and go back to school? Do I look at a vocational school, like go to a culinary school? And that has to do with food and nutrition, and I'll get back to it. But then culinary school is really expensive and high stress and late hours. I'm like, that does not sound like fun. I like to cook. So during that time, I ran into a recruiter for a cosmetology school in the cafeteria at the school I was working at. And I just stopped by to see what he was doing. And he said that it's just here to give an opportunity for the seniors after they graduate to give them options. And I'm like, huh. And I grabbed some papers and I take it home, talk to my wife about it. And I set up an appointment to take a tour of the school to see what it was about. Had some more questions asked and answered. And 6 weeks after that, I was in cosmetology school. I was just really, I think I can do this. And one thing that he said to me was like, with you being a guy, can be more successful than the girl next to you. And I'm like, but I know nothing about hair. He's like, but because you're a guy, there's a bigger chance that you will be more successful than the girl next to you. I'm like, all right, we'll figure this out. So I turned 27 and I'm in cosmetology school with 50 other girls, 18, 19, and 20 years old. There's one other guy, and I am not your mold. Like,
So funny what you just brought up though. That's so true. I remember they said the same thing to me because when they hired me as the receptionist, I was like, "Are you serious? Like you really want me to do this?" And because they put me in this place called the Atrium, which was like this big salon. Like it was a big howdy towdy. It had like massage therapists and all this stuff. And I was like, "Are you serious?" In Granite Bay, like in this really fancy part of Granite Bay. And they go, "Yes." And they said, because a tall guy you tell them that their hair looks nice, they'll believe it. Right. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was so true. I don't know how many times hairdressers would come up to me before their people came out and they'd be like, just tell her it looks great. And it would be, older woman, like 63, 64. And it didn't look bad. It looked good. But I would be like, "Wow, you look great." And they would just walk out like their whole world has changed. You know what I mean? And it's just so funny how that affected that you could have. And so I imagine as a hairdresser, it would even be more,
So as a hairdresser, yes. But during my journey through school and doing hair, I've been doing hair now for 13, coming up on 14 years. Trying to figure out why are men more successful at hair than say the women are. And I've asked my clients too, because I've had clients come to me because I was a guy. Only reason. I could be a crappy hairstylist, and they would come to me because I was a guy. And I had a couple different answers. I had one client who said that as men, we listen better. As a male hairstylist, that we listen better because we don't have long hair, because we don't have highlights. We want to meet their needs. And so we'll do a better job of listening instead of trying to do a quick something or other and do what I think you want versus what you're really asking for. Now there's the battle of the sexes. There's a psychology of it. Who's going to salons? Females. So as a male stylist, for me to say, I think you would look great with hair that is this long, we'll do some layers, add some highlights here, and we'll style it like this, and you'll look beautiful. They're going to believe me more than a girl who's to say the exact same thing. Or if I wanted to switch it up completely, I'm like, okay, it's like you've been blonde for way too long. Let's take you to a ginger, and we'll give you a nice red color, have it flow like this. We'll add some dimensions with just like the slow lights, and we'll do that way. It matches your skin tone and your eyes will pop. Like a big change like that, the girl will listen to me over another female, just because they're not gonna trust them, because they're like, you're a girl, you're competition. You're trying to make me not look as good as you do. The internal struggle. And that's what another stylist had told me about that battle in it. And so it's really like unspoken, but it works the same way. Like, okay, before I became a hairstylist, after the mission I'm at Nordstrom Rack and I want to buy a new shirt and tie. And I find a shirt, it's light blue, has some pink checkers, or there's some pink thrown into it. And I asked the girl who was working over there which tie would look good with it. And she picks a tie out for me saying, you need to get this one with that one. Sold. Girl was cute. She knows what she's talking about. My wife hates that tie. I still have it. Hates it. Does not like it. But the cute girl at Nordstrom Rack said that it looks good. So I believe her.
You know what's funny about that? I have a story about that. I remember I was with a good friend. She's actually a colleague of mine at work. And we a bunch of us had gone. She drove me to a bunch of the attorneys all went out to this place for a restaurant for lunch or whatever. And neither one of us had any appointments. And so she's like, "Hey, I need to run over to Nordstrom Rack. Do you mind if we go over there?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I always thought pea coats were like the douchiest thing in the world. And I remember thinking that. I remember like pea coats. I will never own a pea coat. Right. And we went over there and there was a pea coat in my size. And I looked at it and I was like, I will never have that. She's like, "Try it on." And I tried it on and she goes, "I'm not going to lie, Josh, you look really good in that pea coat." And I was like, "Well, you know what? I'm going to buy it then." And I did. And it was like, and I had no desire but just because a female who I respected had like told me it looked good. Like Jared, if you were there, no offense, but if you were like, you look really good on that pea coat, I'd be like, yeah, but I'm not going to buy it. I think it's douchey. But a female who, and again, it was like someone I had no interest in any way, like other than just, she's just a female that I know, that I trust. I was like, huh, women would like this. Well then, I guess
Right.
I'm going to wear this pea coat.
And that's what it comes down to for hair, where it's like, well, if Jared thinks I'm going to look good with my hair like this, then my husband, my boyfriend, men in general, or whoever they're looking for
Right.
is going to find me attractive too. And even though this is something I wouldn't have asked for, I trust them.
Right.
And so there's that part going on. And then I had a client say that as a guy, well, no, not a client. This is my understanding of it. Most men, we like to work with our hands, but our brains are very math and science based.
Mm-hmm.
And hairstyling is a lot of math and science, a lot of shapes, angles, a lot of cutting. There's the chemistry that comes into color and mixing the color and what you're going to start with and where like you're going to go. You're looking at skin color, eye color. You're looking at what they wear. You're looking at the time of the year. You're looking at what the event is. Like there's so many details that go into doing hair that's where my brain lives. And so it was really cool to be like, no, this makes more sense. I would ask random questions during school. And I learned to wait till after the class was over to ask my instructor what these questions are. And because I didn't want to take up their time for some silly question that I had, but there's a lot of times where I'm just looking at things in a different way and I want to have a better understanding of it. So instead of just taking the instruction of A plus B equals C, I'm like, what happens if I'm starting at F and I want to make a detour by Q? How can I get back to G? Like,
right.
And like, I want to know those things, and it may mean nothing. I may never come across it, but for me, I enjoy it. And so learning more about the sciences of hair and why it does things is really cool. And so
that's interesting.
Yeah.
And do you enjoy, like I said, I mean, one of the things I loved about the job when I was working there was just the relationships that you build. Like even just with my coworkers, I ended up leaving the atrium and going with, they wanted me to go to this other salon, this other like spa that they had. And I met the manager and she was really cool. And she's like, come with us, please. I'm going to make it a good spot for you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, no, totally. Let's do it. And man, like she and some of my coworkers there became like really good friends. Like I just really enjoyed hanging out with them and hearing what was going on with their lives. But at the same time, also there was a ton of cattiness going on there too. Like, do you deal with that? Like, do you hear a lot of that? Are there people that I imagine you probably don't get into it as much as the women do? I just remember the women hairdressers, especially over at the Atrium when I was there, they were like vicious to each other. I mean, there were a couple women who wouldn't talk to each other. They didn't want to be scheduled the same times. And it was like, and they used to be best friends. And, you know, someone was dating somebody's boyfriend after they broke up and like all of this crazy stuff.
So being a man, bringing the testosterone into the building balances things out. Like, yes, some drama happens, and yeah, it would happen around me, kind of. But I learned that many women behave different, talk differently when there's a guy around.
No, that's a good point. Yeah. Just like so, guys, we talk way different when women aren't around.
For sure. And so the salon that I'm at right now, the owner's husband is running the salon and running the front desk. And in the mornings, we still have somebody who comes in the afternoons. But so I have another guy there, and I have two other stylists who are men. And so having 3 male stylists in one salon is rare, at least in my experience.
Unless it's a barber shop or something, you know?
Right. And so just the balance of testosterone and estrogen, like it's a really cool place to be. I love my coworkers. Like they're fun. I feel out of place because I'm older kids and they're like younger and single and they're going out and doing stuff. But it's really cool because they look at each other as colleagues. And I've viewed other stylists this way as well. They're a colleague. They're not competition. And if I view you as competition, then what am I doing in this industry? Like I want to be excited for your success. If my client goes to you and you can give them what they're asking for and they're happy with their relationship with you or whatever, like awesome. Like sure, I'm going to miss my client because we do build those relationships, but a lot of it comes to what we think the other person is saying or what we think they're thinking, and we misinterpret it. And that's where I think a lot of the drama comes from, instead of being honest and clear about things and being an adult. But it really is that balance of, if you look at each other as a colleague, as I'm here to work with you instead of work against you, then things are chill. It's usually that competition that really ruins things, in my opinion.
Does that ever affect you? So I remember before my job now, as an attorney, I was working in a cell phone store and I was the manager. And in retail, I was married, I had kids, and all that. I was going through school, and I was trying to go to law school. And I just was kind of a little bit older and just in a different space of life than the people who were working for me. And we were in a commission job. And I mean, being a hairstylist is kind of a commission job too, right? I mean, you get paid based on how much, at least your tips, like you get paid by how much you cut hair and how good of a job you do and return clientele. So it's very similar.
Yeah.
But I remember I would get so frustrated, and I still do in some aspects. It's something I'm working on, but I would get so frustrated that there would be basically kids working for me. I think I was, 26, 27, 25, 26, 27 as I'm doing this. And these kids, they're in their, 20, 21, 22, just kind of maybe going to college a little bit or whatever, but like, I remember one guy, the biggest sales day of the year was Black Friday. I mean, to the point where I had to work. I would work all day, and I wouldn't even work 8 hours. I'd work the entire day because the commission was so good. Black Friday to Christmas, I mean, I was like at the store every single day because you just make so much money. And I remember these kids who I was like, I need you here because my store needs as many people here. And he refused to come in on the busiest day of the year. Now, looking back, like, he wanted to spend time with his family. I should have been more, more sympathetic. But I remember just being like, why are you not hungry? Like, why are you not wanting to get, because I was so hungry to make the money. I just was like, I got, my kids' Christmas is going to be based on what I make tomorrow. You know what I mean? So, no, it was hard for me working with people that were younger like that, who were not as motivated, who were not as disciplined, who did not have the drive. It just, I don't know. Is that hard for you? I mean, if you're working with a bunch of younger hairstylists, because I go to a barber shop that's near my house when I get my hair done. And it's like the guy there owns his own shop, and he would always complain to me about how he can't get people to come in and work. Like he would be like, oh yeah, I can't, they don't want to come in on Saturdays. And I'm like, how would you not want to come in on Saturdays? It's the busiest day, and he's like, I don't know, man. I mean, does that drive you nuts or?
No, I try to stay out of that stuff because I'm working for like my family.
Right.
So for me, I'm trying to build my skills so that I can be the best stylist that I can be. It's priorities, and people have to learn the hard way at times, or you don't ever know what's going on inside their head and what's happening. Now, busiest days on Saturdays, traditionally, yes. I feel there's been a bigger shift in clientele who would rather take time off work for an appointment and go get their hair done than to go in on a Saturday. So that there's been a small shift there. But really, it's you train your clients for you, or your clients will just like train you. That with us, with me saying that, it's kind of like When you are a newer stylist, you're trying to get all the clients possible because you want to make some money.
Mhm.
Uh, but once you start to hone in on your skills and start to improve and specialize in things and to build a good clientele and you get a good return, you can start to pick and choose what days like you want to work and what hours. Um, the whole supply and demand. You're like, I'm busy, so it's time to raise my prices. And then some people fall off and some people come on and you start doing that. And so I think understanding the business itself, but also understanding the experience of what you're giving goes into that because it's not just I'm here and I'm available, but it's how good are you? Are
Yeah.
you listen to me? Do you know how to cut hair? Do you know how to do this haircut? Do you know how to do that color? And for a lot of stylists, at the beginning, you want to say yes to everything. Oh yeah, I can cut curly hair, and then they go and they cut it, and it doesn't turn out well.
Mhm.
Or to do a men's cut. Men's cuts are hard to do because you make a small mistake and you see it. Everybody sees it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
more stylists are scared of those short haircuts because because you can see an oops. On longer hair, it can be covered up, and so being able to humble yourself and know what your limits are, and to break it down and be like, I don't have much experience with that, or I haven't done that in years. Don't ask me to do braids. Like, this is real talk right here, right now. I have two daughters, 9 and 6. Don't ask me to do a braid. I haven't done one in years, right? Like, I could do like a basic, like the 3-strand braid, but like a French braid. I'm like, I don't have the practice. I can learn, I can do it. But I know that about myself, and I'm not going to be like, yeah, I can totally do that and try to make it work, and hopefully it doesn't look bad. To where I could be like, my coworker over here is awesome with braids. Let's ask if they have time after this.
Mhm.
And so that's why I see them as colleagues because they're here to work with me. So if clients and clients appreciate the honesty, saying I'm not comfortable with that, or my skills aren't there, but I know somebody who's really good. And
Mhm.
if that stylist that I recommended goes and takes my client, cool.
Mhm.
Like that's how I view it. I could view it as, oh, I'm losing on that money. I kind of view it as like, oh, I'm going to miss them.
Mhm.
You do build those relationships, but there's a lot of people out there who need their haircut, who need their hair colored,
Right.
not
Right.
just hustle in a different spot.
Yeah.
But depending on the level or where you are at within the career, really does affect how you approach it as competition versus like a colleague, and trying to have that hustle like during the holiday season. November, December, it's go time. Like, it's a
Yeah.
big and everyone's busy, and you do make a lot of money, but then I know it calms down in the next month. And so being able to suck it up and do those things, I can do that. And I know that going into becoming a hairstylist.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. That's what's so funny about those commission jobs. I remember I just knew between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I would actually schedule my years. I would be working. I mean, I would try to see, I wasn't supposed to. I would get in trouble, but I would work 12-hour days, from open to close as many days as I could. And then I would take the entire week between Christmas and New Year's off because I knew that was the week all the returns were coming back. And I was like, I'm not doing the returns. Especially, and that was the thing. I mean, and I've kind of always been this way, like I said, I mean, I just remember being back then, I was hungry to make the money. You know what I mean? Because I had so many responsibilities and I wanted to make it. And so I just remember during that month, it was like nobody worked harder. I mean, I had done really, really well and during that time, but I was beat. I was like, there's no way I'm dealing with all these returns, coming back the next week. And then January, you would come back and like nobody would be buying. It would be a rough month in January. So you had to plan for that. That's probably what it's like for you. I would imagine that January is a little slower when, after you have all the holiday rush.
yeah, for sure.
Dude, it's a hard, it sometimes that can be a really hard life. I mean, just because especially if you're not like, I was never super good. I mean, I always knew it was coming, but I was never super good at just plotting that. You know what I mean? Just because yeah, I mean, maybe it was because I just had so many bills. I just was like, I got to, pay the mortgage and do all that stuff. And you'd look at it, and then January would come around and it'd be, oof, you know. And you, I mean, I imagine for you too, even when you take vacation, you know, if you, let's say you take a vacation, you take a few days off, you're missing out on the tips, which are like a big part of your income,
for
right?
sure.
So that's a tough life.
Yeah, and calling out sick, it doesn't just affect me.
Right.
Like, I know there's stylists who will do it where like, I don't want to go in today and I just don't want to deal with it. Or I was out late last night and they call it sick, but I'm like, yes, it's affecting your paycheck, but it affects the salon and they have to call your clients and affects them. And if you're booked out, like if they've waited the last 3 weeks to come in and see you and then you call out, now they have to wait another 3 weeks. Like, how do we, it doesn't just affect you. And so for me, I feel super bad about it. Like yesterday it was a rough day at work, and it wasn't the work itself. It was just a lot's going on at home. It was lack of sleep, and I'm like, all right, I got to power through this 8-hour day. And you make it work. And it's like for even that day where I'm like, I just want to stay in bed all day, but I have my list of clients and I'm like, I love my clients. I love doing hair. I enjoy doing it. So if I want a time off, I really need to book out in advance where no one's booked yet. So then it doesn't seem like an inconvenience.
You know what though? That shows a lot of character because, you know, I talk to a lot of different people all the time, you know, in kind of like I don't know if I'd call it a mentorship role or whatever, but it's people who either I work with or people that have worked for me or people who are thinking about going to law school. And that right there is the biggest indicator in my mind of someone who's going to be successful versus someone who's not. And that is like this concept of motivation versus discipline. You know, like I'm dealing with this with my son right now. I mean, he's 15, and I remember being a 15-year-old boy and trying to find my way. He's at a school that's super, you know, it's pretty hard. Like they expect a lot of you, and um, he would say stuff like, "I don't know, like I just am not motivated," and I'd be like, "What does that have to do with anything?" You know, like what do you mean you're not motivated? Like you think that when I get up in the morning, you think that every morning I'm just excited to go to work? You know, do you think that every day I'm excited to go to the gym or these things? No, I'm not excited, but it's just you have to do it whether you feel it or not. I think that comes probably a lot with, I mean, you're a dad, you know, and you know, you got 3 kids, you got a wife, you know, they're relying on you and you don't really have a choice. You know what I mean? Like you have to do it. You could call in sick, sure, but you know, that's going to have an adverse effect on everybody. So you have to do it. And it's just, I think there's a have to mindset that you have to kind of have, right? Is the, like this idea that, you know, it's not, do I want to do it? It's, I have to do it. So when my alarm goes off at 5 a.m., like it's just automatic now. You know what I mean? Like most of the time I'm not getting excited to get out of bed. You know what I mean? But I do it just because it's part of the gig. You know, I know if I don't get into the gym and lift some weights or do some cardio or whatever, that my whole day is going to feel off, you know, and if I'm not going to get to work on time, I'm not going to be able to get this stuff done. And it's just going to pile up tomorrow. So I got to get it done, you know? And
How much of that though becomes a habit though? Like you get so used to doing it where if you don't have a day like that, you're like, where did this time go? I've done nothing with myself. And like you feel bad because you're productive. Like I've been feeling a lot of that. Like there are days where like I'm lying in bed, I'm like, I just want to stay in bed all day. But then as I lay there, I'm like, I have this to do, I have that to do. And it's like I enjoy feeling that I've had a productive day when like the day is done and I got a lot accomplished. Although there are some days where I feel like I just want to play all day or not do anything, but I feel like I have a hard time giving myself that permission to do that because
yeah,
there's always to do, because I have 3 kids and a wife, and because I own a house, and because X, Y, and Z, the garage needs to be cleaned out. Like there's always something that needs to be done, and so to be able to find that balance, and that's one thing I've been working on recently is the balance of having self-care thrown in there, and what does self-care mean? And for me, it's trying to break it of that self-care is not selfish,
right.
but
Totally.
that's what my brain says. It's like spending this time working out or going on a walk or getting a massage. Like I could be spending that time and that money on more productive things for like my family, but then trying to break that thought process to be like, no, I need to recharge myself so I can
Totally.
be present with for my family and for work. And so that's been an interesting journey.
I have a friend of mine who he's got a really cool story. I hope to someday have him on the podcast. Who he former vet. Tells a story about hitting rock bottom and then just piling as much of his stuff as he could into a mini SUV that he rented and driving and sleeping on somebody's floor and walking 1.5 miles to the strip in Vegas to do, to just make enough money to where he can get his own place, and then getting through school and like doing all the stuff. And one thing that he always says is you can't draw water from an empty cup, right? And so there are all these people that rely on you, but if you're empty, you can't help them. It's like that idea that, you get on an airplane, right? And they're like, okay, before you put on anyone else's mask, you got to put on your mask first, right? You have to be able to breathe before you can help other people breathe. I've found personally, and I just tend this to help you out, is just that I have found that the best way for me to make sure that I have self-care, and I have an awesome secretary. It's easy for me because I got a secretary that, like, if I don't put something on my calendar, I'm like in trouble. You know what I mean? And so, because she'll schedule appointments for me at midnight on Saturday night if it's open. You know what I mean? And so I really have to schedule my time, and scheduling in those things is super. For me, it's important. You put it on the calendar, you see it's there. Like if I have a concert I want to go to, it's on the calendar. I know. And then when I have like a day, a week before where I'm just really struggling, or it's just been a crazy day, I know that day I'm going to be, doing the stuff. I'm going to be doing this thing that I really want to do. Or like if I want to go out with somebody and have a good time, like it's there. When I bought the season tickets to the Kings, that was part of the thing. I'm like, these are scheduled times that I'm going to have one-on-one time with my kids, no matter what. So it doesn't matter what's happening this day. I know I'm going to be here, and it's on the calendar. And that's so, so important. And then the other thing, though, and I try to teach this to my son, is that, because he's running around doing, how it is when you're 15, 16 years old, like you're running around all over the place trying to have as much fun as you can, and he should. But I tell him, like, but first you got to do the work. So it's like, if I go out to a concert and I'm out late, you know what I mean? Or I'm out at a Kings game and I go out with, like Jared, you and I went out, to a Kings game one time, and I think we were out pretty late afterwards. And then, but that doesn't matter. If I get home at 1 a.m. and I'm in bed at 1:30, I'm still up at 5. You know what I mean? That doesn't change. So I'm sacrificing that. You know what I mean? Like that's still going on. The work still happens regardless of the play. And that helps me feel productive, right? Like the fact that I can still do that stuff while I'm having this good time.
Right. There's a woman on TikTok. She's a flight attendant and gives all the ins and outs of flying and what to look for, what to do, what not to do, or just to give you some good information about it. And came across one of her videos saying that the flight attendants are trained to take oxygen away from you if there was something to happen. And because they're running the show, if there's an emergency type of situation, they need oxygen more than we do. But she also said that they're also the ones trained on the plane to resuscitate you if you were to pass out. So they're trained to take the oxygen. So it's not even just putting the mask on yourself. Like that hit me big time, where I'm like, I need to take my own oxygen. Like no one's going to hand it to me. I have to take it. And so it's not just doing it, but it's taking it. And so that's been blowing my mind recently. And it's like, okay, what can I do to take oxygen and to fill my cup? And so
it's funny. It's funny you bring that up, because that was another thing is, especially if you're the type of person who derives happiness by making everybody around you happy, or you feel a sense of accomplishment. I think at least a lot of the dads that I know, at least the good ones that I know, they really do derive a lot of happiness with providing their family with, like, making sure their needs are met. My son recently asked me like a super, super morbid question. We were like, driving back from, I think I picked him up from a dance or something like that. And we're driving back and he goes, "Hey, so like, how do you want to die?" And I was like, why are we talking about this? And, but he kept pushing. He goes, "No, I mean, I want to know, like, friends of mine and I were talking and we were like, I want to die being shot in war, or, I want to, blah, blah, blah." And I just remember saying to him, like, you know, I don't really care how I die. I was like, I just want to know, like, when I'm taking that last breath, that like you kids are all going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to know that you guys are good. As long as I know that, I don't really care. Throw me off a building. I don't really care. But like, but the problem is when you're that type of person and all you're doing is like you tend to put everybody else above yourself. Like you like, and a lot of moms are like this too, that I've seen. I know my mom was like this, was that like, they just they just make sure that everyone else is good before themselves. The problem for you is, is that if you do that, then nobody's taking care of you. You know what I mean? And then there's that empty cup, right? And so they're not getting the best version of yourself. So yeah, self-care is huge. Like, and it doesn't have to be like, I'm taking a vacation to Hawaii. It's things like me. The gym is like the place for me to where I just know every day for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, however long I have scheduled. I'm going to put some AirPods in. I'm going to push some iron and I'm going to listen to music or a podcast, and nobody's going to bother me or ask me questions or ask me for food or ask me for a ride, or, you know what I mean? Or ask me about a question at work. It's just going to be me just being able to like push out all the aggression, for a little while. That's huge. That's huge. You need that. So
I recently started going on walks just to like,
yeah.
let's just try this out. And so I've have like a 2.5 to 3 mile loop that I'll go. And the beginning part of doing it was really weird because I'm by myself.
Mm,
So used to having others around me,
yeah.
doing things for others. That's how I've lived my life, is to make sure everyone around me was good. And I didn't worry about myself because I could power through it. And after that first week of going on walks, like my wife noticed that I was different at home, that I was more present, and that I was
Mm,
there, even after a long day at work. And I didn't notice a difference. I thought I was just doing the regular things that I always do. But she's like, "No, you were like present versus before, to where you come home and you'd be like worn out and dead. But even though you took that walk, like you're here. The kids can see it, and it's like, oh, there might be something to this thing. I should probably do more of it." Just because I'm like, I gotta do something, I'll try it. But it's trying to notch out that time to where I'm like, I'm taking this time and
yeah.
not asking for it, but taking it.
That's so important too, because I've learned a lot, especially lately, as I contemplate things like, with life changes going on and things like that, and looking at finances and different things, and looking at how, life looks different than it might have otherwise. I sit there and I think to myself, I go, man, the one thing though that there's only one thing that you can't get back, and that's that time. You know what I mean? That time uh to be present. And I've been the same way. There have been times where I've just been like, I'm here, but I'm not really here. I'm off somewhere else. So especially like with work obligations and things like that, you'll sit there and you'll be thinking, I'll be thinking about a case I have coming up, or something like that. Or I typically am somebody who has a lot of irons in the fire at most times, and it's hard to be present. But the thing is that like, man, especially as every year it seems like time goes by a little faster. You end up with like this, uh you know you don't, especially with the kids, like, man, they disappear. They're going to be gone soon. I mean, so Christian, your oldest, he's 11, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And then you got two girls and their ages are what?
9 and 6.
9 and 6. Yeah. So I mean, and I got to tell you, so mine are 15, 13, 11 and 9. So they're, that's how we always get together, is where kids are just They all
Right.
hang out all the time. And this is probably my favorite time of my of life with my kids. You know what I mean? Like I look back and I was like, they were such pains when they were younger. Like they were just, you ever try to take, I mean, you take 3 kids out to like IHOP or something, what a mess that could be, And then but now they're older, they understand in theory, they understand how they're supposed to act in public, and they have interests, and they have things that they're developing their own personalities and their own humor and they're finding their own things. Like, I don't know, what is it like? I mean, what do you right now as you're doing these things? And I know you've got kind of a life transition. You're going to school right now. You're kind of trying to maybe move on into something different. Like how has being a dad affected you in your decision making and things?
Uh, Huge. It's all of it. Like I have 3 kids I gotta look after and make sure that they are somewhat normal. Like I know it's our job as parents to screw them up, like in the contract. I know that, but I need them to function outside in society. Um, but to be able to give them experiences, and so the things that I have control over, like yes, I want to buy them all the things, and there are times I have bought them all the things, and then I'm like, you guys are brats, and then I'm
Yo,
like,
dude, no,
I'm the reason why you're a brat, and
yeah, God,
so trying to
finding
that balance.
finding that balance, right? Like, because I imagine I think we've talked about this before, because you grew up in a single parent home. Your dad passed away when you were younger, right?
Yeah,
How old was he how old were you when he passed away?
I was 5.
Oh wow, yeah.
So the 6 kids of us were between the ages of 10 and like 6 months old.
Wow. So and when that happened, I imagine that financial stuff was probably a little rough for a
Oh yeah.
while.
Well,
Yeah.
6 kids for a long
Yeah.
while. Like you get 3 boys who are teenagers. Yeah,
Yeah.
my mom's making multiple trips to Sam's Club a week.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I know my parents, they just financial stuff always was an issue. I mean, just all throughout my childhood, to the point where I remember thinking, like when I was a kid, I remember thinking to myself, like that seemed to be the issue, like that, and there were some other issues too. But I remember just going like, if I don't do this and I don't have financial problems, like I'm gonna be happy, because those are all the fights I hear. You know what I mean? Like if I just don't do those things, everything's gonna be fine. And then I've learned that's not true. But but it's funny because you sit there and I remember thinking, like when I started becoming successful, that you'd like provide all this stuff for your kids, the stuff that you didn't have, and then you see how they just kind of, I don't know how many times I've had conversations with my kids where I've been like, I feel so bad for you because you're never going to have to you're never going to have to worry where your next meal is coming from. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, and they think that's so weird. And I go, but you don't understand. Like you develop a certain level of grit when when there's not a safety net, that man, like I don't know how to um fix that. You know what I mean? Like because like you want to, right? Like you're a dad, you know what I mean? Like you see your kids and they want that thing and you're like, I want to give you that thing. You know what I mean? And but then they start expecting it. And then you're like, you little jerk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? I can't remember the first time. So I've had, this, I've had season tickets to the Kings for like 3 years now, right? 3 or 4 years. And just this last year was the first time where my son, I was like, hey, we're going to go Kings game Wednesday night. He's like, I'd rather go to Mutual to church. And I was like, hold on. Like we have good seats at the Kings. I maybe went to a Kings game 5 times when I was by the time I was your age. You get to go all these times and you're rather go to church, like to the church function that's literally every Wednesday, than go to this Kings game. Like I'm taking everything away from you ever. You know what I mean? Like what do you mean? And it's funny how I don't know how you I mean, short of taking everything away, which you're not going to do. What do you do? How do you fix that?
So that's something I've thought about because a couple years ago, my son toy broke. He's like, "Oh, this broke. What do we do?" It's like, "Well, what do you want to do about it?" He's like, "Well, you can just buy one on Amazon. And it'll be here in 2 days." And it's kind of like, "You're absolutely right. It can. Who's paying for it?" He's like, "You are." I'm like, "Yeah, no. Like,
Yeah, right.
how much is this toy?" It's like it's like $50. I'm like, "I got $50 in my wallet right now, but I got that at work for working for 8 hours on my feet. Like,
Yeah,
it's like that's what I got. So what are you gonna do for it?" And he was like, "What do you mean? What am I gonna do for it?" And it's like
right.
we gotta earn it. So it's like we could either try to fix it, we could try to glue it or whatever. You can go without, or you can save your money to buy it again. But it's like, what are you gonna do to earn it? And so the whole thought process of like, well, he's like, "Well, what can I do to earn it?" It's like, okay, so let's talk about this. Like, here's your chores. Here, after those are done, here's some extra chores of which you can earn some money for.
Right.
So then he gets in that mode where it's like, well, I want to earn some money for this and save up for that, and which is great. But I've realized that living here in Sacramento, we have a lot of conveniences close by.
Yeah.
Like my house is walking distance to a Taco Bell.
That would
And
be a problem for me.
my son in the summer, he was like, "Can me and Layla walk over and get some breakfast at Taco Bell?" And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, "We have eggs, cheese, and tortillas in the fridge. Like we can make
Right.
right here." But they wanted to go. I'm like, "That's fine as long as you're paying for it. Cool." Um, but with all these conveniences, DoorDash and all this stuff, like, are they not learning to do it on their own?
Right.
If I lived in a smaller town where people are more willing to help you out to change a flat tire, like I could call AAA and they can come do it. We have all these apps, we have all these things that are close by and super accessible, super convenient, which is great. But do we know how to do those things? And so I would love to move to a smaller town to where people take care of each other, but are also willing to teach you and for you to learn to do those things and to manage without all those conveniences, like putting in the work where it's like, we don't have to here, which on one side is really good, but are we doing anything to improve ourselves? Is there any fire or drive to learn to change a tire?
Right.
No.
Right.
But if you're out driving in the middle of Nevada or whatever and you get a flat tire, don't you want to know how to do that so you can get to the next town? And so
Right.
I feel these conveniences are great and people have made a lot of money off of them to build their businesses, to make our lives easier. I feel a lot of our kids are not getting the opportunity to learn how to do those things on their own.
Yeah, dude, it's so true. And I think you know, we kind of live in a weird spot here in California, particularly in Sacramento area. It's just different. Like if you go, I think we don't understand that like not most of the country works like us. You know what I mean? Like there's just man, like there's so many conveniences and there's so many things. I mean, within walking distance, like my kids do that to me all the time. They're like, "Hey, can I walk down to the Dollar Tree?" And I'm like, "What do you want to get at the Dollar Tree?" And then they come back with candy. My son comes back with like 5 plungers. I don't know why, but you know what I mean? He buys a bunch of plungers and comes back and he's like, "I was gonna give them out to my friends at school tomorrow." I don't know. And I'm like, "You're weird." You know what I mean? Like just stuff like that. And they just there's stuff all around. I don't know how many times like I've been coming home late and dinner's not done, so I'm like, we'll order a pizza and it's there before I get to the house. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just things like that. But when you go to other places, like I spent a lot of time in a small town in Wyoming and some time in Utah and a little bit of time in Texas and different places. And when you spend time in these other places and you see that there are people out there that have just so much less, you know what I mean? That there's not those conveniences and they're happy. And I'm like, what is this? We all have all this extra stuff. Like, you know what I mean? We have all these things. I have all the video games and the Netflix and all the different accounts and all that stuff, and we're miserable. You know what I mean? And it's like, and we're out here and everybody's just happy with nothing. They're like, there was like a 4th of July parade that just goes across. It's just like fire trucks spraying everybody with water and handing out candy, and everyone was just greatest day of their lives.
So
You
much
know what
fun.
I mean? Yeah.
But yeah. That's exactly what it is. Like, it's not so much that we have all these things that's making it worse, but I think it's we're not being as productive as what we could be, or we don't appreciate the things that we have because we just expect it now.
There's a lesson to be learned there too, and when you think about it, like I remember I was just sharing this story, I think at church. You serve a mission, right? You don't have anything. I mean, for those who are listening, if you aren't, if you've made it this far into the podcast, when you go on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you're out for 2 years. You stay within arm's length of a companion who's with you. You live with. You're there 24 hours a day. You're never out of their sight. And then the church gives you a little bit of money to live on every 3 weeks or a month or whatever. And you're living in an apartment or you're sharing a house with somebody else. And you're riding bikes everywhere. And, you don't have much. You're not listening to you're watching TV or listening to music. You're not going to movies. You're not going on dates. You can't even touch someone of the opposite sex. And you're miles away from everybody you love. I mean, it's gotten a little softer now. They can Skype and do all that stuff once a week now from home. I mean, because they're weak now, but like, but
It's a touchy subject, Josh.
yeah, I know. Yeah. But I remember back when I was there, I remember being there. It was like my first couple of months and I was in this like super, super hot, area. It was in Indianapolis and it was super hot. I was hundreds of thousands of miles away from all of my friends and family. And I was living with this dude I didn't know very well. And I was eating a can of tuna because I had no money left. Like I hadn't budgeted very well. And so I was waiting till the money kicked back in to go shopping and get more food. So I'm eating a can of tuna for lunch and I'm sitting there in this apartment with this dude I don't know. And I just was like, I'm happy. You know what I mean?
How much would you get a month?
I think it was $90 a month. I think that was it. It was like 90 or $100. I think it was every 3 weeks we would get.
Every 3 weeks.
Yeah. And that was for all our shopping, our laundry, and like anything we wanted to do for fun, and there wasn't a lot of fun. I mean, there wasn't a lot you could do, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, I mean, like they would run out fast. So I remember there was a time where we ran out of food. And so we were just like breaking up pieces of bread in a bowl and pouring milk over it and calling it profit food. Cause we had heard that Lorenzo Snow used to eat that. And so we call it profit food. Like, I guess we're on profit food till the next thing. And like, but we were happy. We were having a good time. You know what I mean? And it just, for me, like whatever you want to say brings happiness. It just shows me that like, it's not necessarily money. Like money helps, you know what I mean? Like it's definitely nice to not have financial like issues. If you can avoid them, that's great. It's nice to have all your bills paid, but like, at some point some of the most miserable people I know are the richest people I know. I mean, they just are so unhappy. I know I have a few guys I know that are incredibly well off, but just wouldn't want to spend, a day with them because it's just so negative.
Right.
And it's just weird how that works out. So teaching the kids that I think is what I think that's an important thing too. So we've talked a lot about, I want to hit this before we stop this. And that is that we've talked a little bit about self-care. And one thing I wanted to talk about with you is mental health. Because I recently learned, you and I went out to sushi one night and you shared with me that you had learned some stuff about your own mental health and something about you started school and realized that you have is it a learning disability that you have?
ADHD.
Okay. Yeah. And you did not know this until recently.
December.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the last 9 months. So, and you're 40. So, I don't know enough about this, but isn't that kind of rare to go that long without knowing that you have a diagnosable learning disability?
Through my research, no.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So not a learning disability. ADHD is a attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now they've grouped ADD into that as well, but they've learned there's different forms of it. Mainly, it's just a disconnection between the executive function of the brain and what you know. There are things that I know what to do, and I just can't get myself to do it.
Mm.
That's the short of it. Is that's exactly what that is. But also that your brain needs its dopamine hits, and so it's looking for something to give it some dopamine, um, which is why that's the attention deficit part. Is like we're trying to find something that interests us.
Mm.
Along with that, we can hyper focus, which is I consider it like a superpower.
Hmm.
Where if you and I were to focus on one thing, I would get so much more into it than you and retain so much more information because I can hyper focus in on it. Now, what do we hyper focus on? It may change all the time. Have I hyper focused on my record collecting? Probably.
Yeah.
I'd say
Yeah.
that's one of those things, but there are times where I'll be talking and carrying a conversation. I get interrupted, and someone's like, "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you." Like, go ahead and finish. And I'm like, I don't know what I was talking about. Like, like that's real life, like on a
Yeah.
regular basis. Or I don't
So
know where to finish it.
so when we talk about ADHD, I mean, like my vision, and I'm learning from you because I don't know really anything about ADD or ADHD. I've heard of the terms, but I'd always just assumed like someone who had ADD or ADHD, they were like super hyper and just like jumping around and bouncing around off the walls. And that's like kind of the caricature that's been painted of someone who has it. That
Right.
is certainly not, at least my experience with you. You're not somebody who's bouncing off the walls, super hyper, talking fast and running around. So how does it manifest for you? Is it just like what you shared with me? Just it sounds like you just shared right now is that it's sometimes it's hard for you to kind of get focused on something, but then if you do get focused, you get hyper focused on it. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So I am inattentive. Now, this is all self diagnosis. This is not officially diagnosis from a doctor yet. I am in the process of doing so. So, this is all research that I've done for myself. So,
Mm.
take that as you will, but this is what makes sense to me for how I've lived my life and things that have happened in school or like outside of school. I just want to preface with that. That's not an official diagnosis yet, but it's in the works. But I am more inattentive to where I could sit still and be quiet. Am I listening to what's being said? Probably not.
Mm. Mm.
Um, the worst subject, the worst things that I came across in school, it's not the worst, but the things that I was not very good at was reading a book and
Mm.
then to report about it. Um, and we would go through books through English class and all this stuff and given time to read it. And then we'd come back to class the following week and we would talk about it and what happened in this. And I remember maybe senior year, my teachers asked, okay, so what was the big turning point of the story? And some kids go off and starts talking about the big turning point. And I'm like, I didn't catch that at all, but I know he was wearing a red sweater when he fell asleep under the tree. Like
Mm.
something that does not matter. Like that's the stuff that sticks in my head. So all the details. And so I could read a book and I hit a word or a sentence, a phrase, and I will continue to read, but I'm thinking about some field trip I took in the fourth grade and what I had for lunch that day. And I traded this, my fruit snacks for my friends, this, and thinking about something that it's not relevant of what I'm reading, but I'm physically reading every word. And I get to the end of the chapter. I'm like, I don't know what I just read.
Mm.
And so I think that's where movies really came into play in my life because there was a visual. There was a visual and an audio of it. So I could follow it better. There's a face to a name. So it made it easier out for me to understand what was going on. And that comes in handy because of I'm in school now.
Mm.
I'm back in school and it's online. So there's a lot of reading going on. But I've learned that I could highlight the text on my phone and have my phone speak it to me. So then it's easier for me to pay attention. And even if I start to drift off thinking about something totally different, it's still talking to me and I can come back to it. And it's easier for me to stay focused on it. Unless it's a topic that I really enjoy, and then I can get totally into it and I learn as much as I can and I love it. And so but it's hard because there's times where it's like, I need to get this project done or this assignment done and it's due at this date. And I'm like, oh, I have time or I don't have time. And then the anxiety of if I don't do it because I'm procrastinating, I'm stressing over it. But if I just did it and could do it, and then I sit down at the computer and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't even know where to start. And so trying to add in these other tools in my life so I can get that executive function up and going has been the tricky part because I'm not on any medications. And so trying to eat healthier, trying to get a better diet into my system. I've heard that gut health is related to mental health. If that's true or not, at least it's good for my body. It helps out. Going on these walks gets me moving, gets me to think about things before I start my day so that I can plan it out. Like, I'm going to come back. I can work on my schoolwork from this time to that time. And there's a game plan. There's a time change to it. There's a Facebook group I'm a part of men who have ADHD, and there's a lot of them who suffer from losing their jobs because they get distracted. They can't stay focused. And I'm over here. I'm like, how have I been able to do hair for 13 years if these men who have it are having a hard time trying to keep their job? And again, I'm not officially diagnosed, so then maybe I don't have it. But then I realized with hair, my days are scheduled. I have my chair from this time to that time. We have to be done because my next client is coming in. So now my brain's like, oh no, here's the time we have to be done, or else we're putting other people behind. So I'm in emergency mode. I got to work with my hands. I'm on my feet. It's different every single day. So it's not some mundane thing working at a computer all day, every day.
Isn't that interesting how your brain just craves that structure? Like I feel the same way sometimes. Like I'll just be sitting there and there'll be times, if I got appointments scheduled all day, I feel though my days are so much like the times that I don't have people coming in all day, I am like, okay, I got to get through these emails. I got to get to this letter. I've got to get to this phone call. I've got to do these things. And if I don't, I'm going to be here longer. So I got to get it all done. But on the days where I don't have anything scheduled, it's just lackadaisical at getting this stuff done. Like I'm not as efficient. It's almost like the busier you are, the more efficient you get. It's kind of like that what you were saying, where you're like, you have those days when you don't have anything to, you don't have anything to do, and so you just kind of want to lay in bed, and then you feel like you just haven't done anything. Like I'm just such a piece of crap because I've just been laying in bed all day. I've had those days, you know what I mean, where you're like, you sit there and you get into a show and you're like, I'll just watch one episode of Cobra Kai or something like that. And the next thing you know, you're like, I just watched the whole thing of Cobra Kai. I've been sitting here for 5 hours. I haven't eaten or gone to the bathroom. I haven't showered yet. Like, what's wrong? What's wrong with me?
Do I feel bad about myself? Not today.
Not at all. Not at all.
So I've learned with me, this is even before this came across my plate as a possible thing. I learned that if I take my shoes off when I get home, my day's done. And then if I leave them on, I can still get work done. So even if I come home and sit down in my recliner, if my shoes are still on, my brain is still clicked in to be like, we can still work. I can still walk out of the house and run to the store. I can still do this. But as soon as my shoes come off, like my brain checks off and I'm not productive the rest of the time. And yeah, this was probably a year and a half or so ago where I realized that. And so there are times where I'll ask my wife, I'm like, can I take my shoes off now? Like I ask for permission, basically saying, is there anything else that needs to get done that I can help with? Like I'm still in work mode. My shoes are still on. Is it okay if I take them off? And depending on what the time is, it may be like, oh, can you take the garbage cans out to the street tonight before you take them off? Yeah, cool, done. It may be something I forget, but it's like if I do that as soon as I get home, yeah, it is super hard to get motivated to get up to clear the table after dinner or to do dishes or
Mhm.
and it's just and I learned that that was an ADHD thing just a couple of months ago, that it's like, oh, that's not just me, like that is, well, it's me, but it's an actual
It's you because you have this mental health thing going on. Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's so funny that you bring that up too, because that structure. Again, I've been, my kids, um, they, I try to establish that with them too, and that's it's taken a long time. I've tried to develop these things because with all the stuff I have going on in my life, I really have to keep just to keep things organized. I have to have everything scheduled, and I remember telling I don't remember which one of my kids it was. It was one of the, there's probably either the older boy or older girl, Austin or Piper. I told him, I go, listen, you can go and you can have all the fun you want, but first you got to get everything done. Like you just have to get it done because the second this is just me. The second I start into fun mode, like it gets real hard to get back into work mode. Like I'm kind of similar. I'm not the shoes thing, but like, if I have my work clothes on and I change into like, in the winter, if I change into a hoodie and pajama pants, I'm basically ready for bed. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay. So, it's hard for me at that point to be like, all right, let's get some jeans on and go out and do this thing. It's hard to get those things done. So I've kind of developed this idea that like I'm just going to get all the work done, and then once all the work is done, then I can sit down and I've developed with my kids. You need to be able to earn your sleep. You know, where like when you get into bed, you earned it. Like, okay, I did my stuff. You know what I mean? I did everything I needed to do today. And because that was another thing on my mission that I remember learning is that when you like I remember there were days where we worked so hard. I mean, I don't know how your mission went, but I know there were days we were just working really hard all the time where you would like get in bed at 10:30 and it was the greatest feeling in the world. You were like, oh yes,
Yeah.
what I mean? This is so nice. And like, and that was a great feeling because you felt like you got so much stuff done. You know what I mean? And just and fulfilled life. But so what's the next step? Like what do you do now? Like now that you know that you have this, assuming you do, and even if you don't, I imagine it's something similar to, right? Like even if it's not ADHD, you have some sort of thing that mimics that. So now that you know, what are do you have to, are there certain safeguards you can put in place? Like you mentioned a few, which I think are anybody that would help any mental health issue, eating right, exercise,
Right.
getting to sleep on time, things like that. What other things do you do to kind of help yourself with that?
Scheduling myself, writing things down. I got post-its that are around and accessible. I bought a whiteboard and I put it next to my bed. So it's something that I see on a regular basis. So if there's an event coming up, say I get invited to a birthday party that's next week, I'll write that on there. So that one, I physically wrote it. So then I tend to remember that. But then I see it on a regular basis. And so then I know, okay, this is coming up. That's what this is. Because then it could be like I get invited and then I'm off doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, that's today. I booked 3 other things at the same time because I forgot about it.
Hmm.
So trying to learn how to work with it, having tools that is not medication,
Hmm.
so that I can still function. Like I still function, but a lot of it is just my mindset
Hmm.
and planning things out. I think knowing that my brain works differently helps,
Yeah.
because there's times where I would forget things, and it uh, put a wedge in between me and my wife because I would forget to do something that she asked. And so if you forget to do something, then it must mean I don't care about her or I don't love her,
That's
or
rough.
right. And to where it's like, I honestly forgot. And it actually got to a point where I'm like, where she asked, or I got to a point where I'm like, there must be something wrong with me. So I went and got my blood tested to get my hormones checked, because low testosterone can have some of the same effects as ADHD, having a foggy brain and being forgetfulness and the sluggishness and all this stuff. And so it's like, okay, so there's a balance between our physical health, like as for testosterone as well, to get us up and going. So giving it all the help I can give it became a priority. But I learned for an ADHD thing is if I feel like I can't complete a project within the time that's given, I can't start it because I can't finish it. And so, and I'm like, oh, I've done that so many times. Like my wife bought me a dresser, nice tall dresser off of Facebook. And it was in our garage, and it was like moving my dresser to the girls' room and taking the girls' dresser into the garage to get rid of that one. And I have my new dresser and all this stuff. And it had been in the garage for probably a good 3-4 months. My wife had told me that I wasn't picking up the slack, and I was not doing my part of the partnership. And so my brain got into emergency mode. And so while she was gone at work, the kids were at school, I went in and I moved this dresser all upstairs. Like it's bigger than what I should have done. I totally gotten hurt.
Right.
But it's like, crap, I've dropped the ball. I got to fix this. So I'm going to do all the projects that I can to show her that I'm not doing it on purpose.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting too, relationships, man, that's a rough thing is when, when you legitimately, someone takes something that you do, an action you do as something not intended. And for them, it's very real, like your wife, I'm sure, like it sounds like I'm guessing acts of service is her love language or something of that nature, right? We've all heard this love language business. And so, she interprets that as, oh, well, he's forgetting to do this thing. It's because it's not important because I'm not important, when it's really just, you just forgot, it's not that it's not important. And because of your ADHD, right, you are probably, because look, like, let's be honest. And this is what's, you ever seen that movie, The Breakup, the one with Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston?
Yes.
Where they're sitting there and they're arguing about the dishes, and he's like, you want me to do the dishes? I'll do the dishes. And then she goes, I don't want you to do the dishes. I want you to want to do the dishes. And he's like, who wants to do dishes? Like,
right.
And so, but that's that whole dichotomy you have there, right? It's not who wants to move the dresser, right? That's not something you're interested in, but you're hyper focused on your record collection. You know what I mean? And so you're way interested in your record collection, and that's how your ADHD kind of rears its ugly head, right? Is that like you're so hyper focused on these things that you're super interested in that it almost takes away from the things that you're not interested in that you have to do, but you just don't have capacity in the brain to do it, right?
Yeah. And so knowing that we've learned about this because my daughter has been diagnosed and it's a genetic thing, makes a whole lot more sense to her now. To where it's not just that I'm not listening because I'm more interested in my records or of something else, but there is actually a disconnection going on in my brain that I have no control over. But we've learned that putting an expiration date on it is beneficial. Hey, can you move the dresser before 7:00 tonight? Now my brain's like, okay, we got to get this done. There's a purpose, there's a time frame. But if you're like, hey, this needs to be moved up, okay.
Oh, that's yeah.
And so
hard deadlines are so important. Yeah.
For even something just around the house. Hey, can you make sure this gets done? And that reminds me that I have not done something that Lindsay asked me to do a couple of days ago. So I'll need to do it tomorrow.
Right.
But it's like having those things where it's like, as we're talking about, I'm like, oh, I did have a deadline. I did not make it. Like now my brain, I'm going to go write that down when like we're done here so I can do that tomorrow.
Right.
But I do it because I didn't feel like I had the time frame to complete the task. So understanding these things is really it's eye-opening, and it's helped me to understand what I need to do to be more productive.
Yeah.
So
That's I'm glad you figured that out, you know, because I could see how that could really put a major rift in a relationship if you don't figure that out.
Right.
Because, if you don't understand uh why someone's it's interesting in relationships. Sometimes we do that too, right? Like people, for whatever reason, especially with mental health issues, I've just noticed that, like, I have a lot of people around me who I am very lucky that at least that I know of, that been I've never been diagnosed. I do not believe I have any diagnosable mental health issues. I mean, I'm sure that people think I'm crazy, but I mean, like, I don't have I've never been on medication for anxiety, depression. Like, I've never been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, any sort of learning disability. I don't have any of that stuff, but I have a lot of people around me who have, in family and relationships and things like that. And it's really, if you don't understand what's going on in someone's brain, it's really easy to attribute the most malicious intentions. You know what I mean? Like in that situation, right? Like you're talking about the situation with your wife, where it's not that you don't care, you just don't have the capacity. But because she doesn't know that, and you don't know that, right? I mean, you don't even know that, uh, for whatever reason, the way your brain is wired, it just didn't at that time have the capacity to understand the dresser. She attributes that to, he doesn't care about me. And knowing that there is that issue there, helps kind of remove that malicious intent. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I used to not be um, big on mental health stuff when it came to, like, therapy, or I'd hear something about, oh, someone's depressed or whatever. Um, I would always just be like, well, suck it up. I don't know what to tell you. Like, but man, like, you can't put enough emphasis on making sure that mentally you're okay, because if, you know, like, I've had some opportunities in my own life to just kind of like look at my own mental health in the last few years, particularly related to a brain, a situation where I got a concussion and different things like that, where it's really turned me into particularly a better father. I feel like, with my kids, being more present with them and understanding them. Not that it's perfect, but, I mean, learning those things and being involved in mental health really, or taking care of your mental health, is so paramount. I mean, and it sounds like you're noticing that yourself.
Oh, for sure. The brain is a powerful computer. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy of what it can do and make you feel, and how to act and what to say. I had a teacher in the seventh grade. He played a joke on a student, and a kid had showed up later, had to go to the office and come back, and he told the rest of the class to ask him how he was doing, asking him if he felt okay. Hey, are you feeling okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. But more and more kids asked throughout the day. He went home sick that day
Hmm.
because if people asked him if he was okay, then he believed, or his brain felt that it's like, I must be sick because
Hmm.
everyone's asking me, even though I don't feel it. So it's like, is that just the power of suggestion, or is that just our brain saying people must think we're sick, so let's go home sick? I don't feel good.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, the brain is really fascinating, and how different people, based on where they grew up and what they did, and their childhood trauma or whatever, or their mental health issues, or that how they can see the world so differently, and how that affects really everything that you do. I mean, it's really surprising. You made a joke about how that there's a way you're gonna, like, screw up your kids. I worry about that all the time. Like, I worry so much about, I joke with my kids all the time. I'm like, don't worry, well, I'll pay for your therapy. It's fine. Because I just, sometimes I get so hard, like, especially on my oldest son. I'm so hard on him because he's one of the smartest people I've ever met, but he just also just doesn't have the drive yet. He's getting it. You know what I mean? Like, especially this year, I'm noticing he's really getting it. But he just, unless he's super interested in something, you know what I mean? Like, he just doesn't care. You know what I mean? He just doesn't care. And so he just won't do it. He just won't do the work. Where it's one of those things where you're like, if you just did the work, like you would have no problem. You know what I mean? Just do the work. And he
Right.
just won't do it. And so but sometimes I wonder, I'm like, man, am I pushing him too hard? You know what I mean? Am I doing this too much? And so it's interesting how the and it's different because I respond to harsh criticism to me. I mean, you played basketball. Like every basketball coach I ever had was one of the biggest jerks on the face of the planet. Like they were calling me an idiot all the time. You know what I mean? I just thought that was how you were supposed to, you know what I mean? Like that's how I respond to that, but my son doesn't necessarily do that,
Right.
and everybody's different. That's another thing that I find really interesting about being a father is you sit there and it's like, you've got 3 kids and I've got 4. You probably appreciate this. I could I could respond the same way if all 4 of my kids had done the same thing and I responded the same way to each of them. I would get 4 different responses to what I did. Like each one of them, they respond differently. So like one of my kids will get mad, like my son, he's like, "Why are you not so hard on them? You're hard on me." And I go, "Because I can't do that to them. Because if I do it to them, like if I do it to my daughter, she's going to cry her eyes out.
It will destroy her. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll destroy her completely. If I do it to my other daughter, it won't resonate at all. I mean, I have 2 daughters. One is the most sensitive person I know. The other one, I could hold a gun to her head and tell her I'm going to blow her head off if she doesn't take out the garbage, and she'd be like, "Pull the trigger." You know what I mean? So she just, like they're just different. They're all just different kids.
You'd still have
So
to take garbage. So
right, yeah, yeah. But I mean, like, but that's the thing, right? Is that each one of them is different and they respond so differently, and that's just people are like that too.
oh
And
yeah.
I mean, it's just so interesting how that all works and the relationships with every how human beings function is just so fascinating. So yeah.
And it's funny because society's trying to get us into all these boxes like we started out talking with. And it's like, if you belong to this party, you're over here. If you do this, over there. If you're a masker, anti-masker, vaccine, whatever political party, there's all these little groups you got to fit in. It's like, and both of us, it's just like we're over here. We're like, no, like, sure, a little of that box, a little of that one, a little of this, but I'm me right here. And I feel like that's what we all need to do and just be more aware of others. Um, One, just to be kind,
Yeah.
uh, but to be genuine, to find out who we really are. And with the apps of Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, like we're looking at all these other people and how perfect their lives are when really it's just a picture, a
Oh,
perfect picture, and
yeah.
it's real life. And everyone's a mess too. And so to just show kindness of, you're a human. How are you doing? I tell my clients that all the time after COVID. It's like it's taught us to stay away from each other when really during this time we need to get closer and we're not having those conversations of how are you?
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, I think that's so interesting that you bring that up is because I see that a lot, right? And that I think is the purpose of why I'm doing this podcast in the first place. I have a very eclectic group of friends. I mean, I have so many different friends because I just have so many different interests that if I mean, I've got friends from pro wrestling, I have friends from law, I have friends from high school and basketball, I have friends from church. I have friends that I just became friends with because of interests in music, and they've all gone in all these different directions, and we've come to a point. It's almost like where if the people have decided that if people don't like, I'm not going to hang out with anybody who doesn't think exactly like me, and like I remember, especially like there's this cancel culture thing going on out there. And it's not just cancel culture like somebody says something on Twitter and it's racist or something. And so everybody cancels them. But even like somebody does something wrong. I mean, I see this a little bit in my church, like groups, I guess. Somebody does something wrong and it's egregious, right? It's bad. And then, uh, and I don't think it's malicious, but like people kind of stop talking to them, you know, I see it a lot when if somebody breaks up, like the, a divorce or something, and there's one party that did something particularly terrible, right? Like, something really bad to the other one. And so everybody kind of picks sides. And in fact, I had a friend who, him and his wife divorced, and it was pretty clear it was pretty much his fault. I mean, there's two sides to every story, but it was bad. It was real bad,
Right.
and everybody was kind of cutting him off. And it was kind of a few people around me kind of expected me to do that too, and I just was like, no, I'm not going to do that. you know and they're like, why? And I go, well, just because he's imperfect, what am I supposed to do? Like, what happens when he hits his rock bottom? You know what I mean? What happens? Because if everybody disappears, who's he gonna turn to? I'll be that guy.
Right.
And as long as he's not trying to get me actively to do something that's against my morals, or is not trying to bring me down to his level. If if he makes a phone, if he calls me, I'm gonna have a call. I'll talk to him. If he wants to go to lunch, I'll go with him. Because and that's the thing, right? Like, people will leave church, or people will leave a political party, or people will say, you know what, I don't necessarily believe that, and then everybody wants to kind of delete them from their lives. And I don't think that that's okay. I'd rather have all these people around me and learn from them, because they're fascinating. I mean, I have so many friends like, Jared, you're fascinating. You know what I mean? Like, think about this. Like, you're a 6'8" hairdresser who loves records and ska music and has 3 kids and is going to school, but has ADHD and is fighting through it. Like, that's awesome. You know what I mean? And that's a story that should be told. I think that's great, and I have so many friends like that. So I don't know. I think that this, I hope that if people made it through the 2 hours and however many minutes that we've been talking about this stuff, that they hear that, like, here we have a guy who's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who's Mormon. And you would think, if you met him just on the street, that would mean he would think X, Y, and Z, that he doesn't like these types of people, or he doesn't do these types of things, or, but the fact is you're a human being. You're a human being that has a life span of experiences that makes you who you are. I think that's pretty awesome.
When we moved out here to the north part of Sacramento, came to a new ward, and they just started up playing basketball again. And so now when I introduce myself, hey, I'm Jared, and turns out I'm a hairstylist. And it's usually the wives come to me and we start talking hair, and the guys are like, cool, hair, whatever. Like, no. And so they started up basketball. And so I come out to play, and I saw the eyes on me, like, is he just a tall guy, or that just wants to play? Like, he's not going to be very good. But it's like, I had a really good coach in high school. Like, I have a decent outside shot, I have ball handling skills, I can post up, but they only know me as a hairstylist. And so it's kind of like, can he run with us? He doesn't seem like the athletic type.
Right.
I'm a hairstylist. I get put in that box. And it's like, I know more than just hair. I enjoy a lot more than just my job.
Right. And I've played basketball with you. You're good. I mean, you're a good player. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that, we put people in boxes. And I think if we sat down, and I think this is something that we're really missing in society. Like, I just recently had listened to a podcast where it was a guy, I can't remember his name. I wish I remembered it, but it's an African-American guy who has had more Ku Klux Klan members give him their hoods than any other person. And
Wow.
he tells the story about how he would meet these guys, he would go to their homes, he would befriend them, and over the course of years, he would convince them that what they were doing was wrong. And that includes a grand wizard. He was able to have a grand wizard turn in his hood. I mean, there's not enough of that going on. I think there's a lot of people out there who, like, when they talk to me, like a lot of people who aren't Mormon, they talk to me and then they go, I didn't think Mormons thought that way. Or, I don't know how many times I have not been invited to events just because they think, well, he's Mormon, so he probably wouldn't want to be here. And sometimes they're right. You know what I mean? But I mean, like, there are times where, it's same way, right? Like, we may have friends that, at church, right? Or we have a church function that, well, I don't think that they'd really enjoy that. That's another thing this is not the Josh brags about his kids podcast, but like, my kids are so good about inviting their friends who maybe aren't necessarily like, the type of kid that you would expect to be at like a Mormon function, like just inviting their friends from school to come to church activities. You know what I mean? And just have them come out and just be a part of the group. And I just think that's so fun. You know what I mean? That they're willing to do that. And so I don't know. It's interesting that, well, this podcast thing is going to be interesting. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know where it's going to go. I just figured if I didn't start doing it, I never would. So I was like, if I keep trying to define what this is going to be, it's never going to materialize. So I figure, you know what? This is a good first run, and we'll keep going through these things, and I'll have you back on after I get a few more under my belt. We'll have to talk about. We didn't even get to some of the things I wanted to talk about. You got to watch the 5th season of Cobra Kai, so you can come back in here and we can talk about that.
Started episode 1 a couple nights ago. We didn't talk about movies.
I know we didn't talk about movies. Gosh, we were on 2 hours and 15 minutes. See, that's why I'm gonna have you back on again, and then we'll specifically focus on movies and Cobra Kai, and talk about that. There's so much we can talk about on that. So
true. So true. So much. I feel we could talk for another 2 hours, to be honest.
No, it's true. It's true. That's what I love about that's one of the things why I'm really excited about this, right? Is that, like, I had some friends who were like, oh, you should no, it shouldn't be longer than a half an hour, or it shouldn't be longer than this. And you really want to make sure that like what kind of topic you're going to do. And I just was like, I think that's all stupid. Like, how are you supposed to possibly talk to somebody and really get to know them in a half an hour? You know what I mean? Like, we've been going 2 hours and 15 minutes or so. And like, I haven't even scratched the surface about some of the interesting things, eclectic things that you like to do. Like, you're definitely going to have to come back on so we can talk again,
So we may have to have it more organized and be like, here's what we're talking about. These 2 things. We can go 2 hours into that.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Movies, Cobra Kai. We'll go deeper into your music tastes.
Okay.
We'll talk about, one day we'll have to have a conversation about concerts we've been to. So that way we can talk about that. I got a list. It's long. So
one thing to touch on movies before we leave, talking to Lindsay about my top 5 movies, because I'm like, I can't do top 5. No way.
Right.
Like my quick list was 11 movies.
Right.
And then Lindsay is like, oh, but you watch this and you watch that, and you watch that. And so, like, her list of my favorite movies may be different than my list, because it's just what she sees me watch the most.
Oh.
I'm like, oh, that is interesting, because there's some movies out there that I really love that are really good, but I don't watch as often because I need to give it my full attention.
Right.
Like, say, Inception. It's such a mind movie. So many details.
Yeah, you can't turn that on as you're falling asleep. No, you gotta.
It's like, but that's up there.
Right.
I don't watch it as much, so Lindsay may not have that in my top list because I don't watch it as often. So that's
interesting. I think I'm gonna play that. That's a fun game to play. Have like your person closest to you be like, what do you think my top 5 movies are?
Yeah.
That'd be a fun little game to play. Yeah. Okay. We'll have you come back on, but tell me what her top 5 of your movies were.
Oh, she hasn't told me yet. We were supposed to talk this afternoon, and she took a nap.
Well, you know what? Then next time, you know what we'll do? I'll have you both come on. You can come on together, and you guys will do each other's top 5, and we'll talk about it. That'd be fun.
That would be fun.
That'd be fun. And then she can defend herself when you talk about all these things about her. You'd be like, yeah, she thinks I don't love her, and then she'll be like, well, you don't. Here's why.
And I'll be like, because it was Tuesday.
All right. Well, hey, dude, thanks for being the first guy to come on. It's a lot of fun. And like I said, we'll have you back on. We'll once I get a few more of these under my belt and I start getting better at this, then we'll be a little more organized and be able to get it through. But it's really good to have you. I knew when I said, okay, I'm going to do my first one, I knew that you were the guy. I was like, I'm going to have Jared be my first. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
So yeah, you'll be episode 1. Anyway, Jared Joyner, thanks for being on the Edlow podcast, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.